Some of you who have never spoken on a lectureship need to hear what that last line is. He said you have 35 minutes, and every time they say that, he sounds like a warden telling you that the electric chair is ready. I'm very, very grateful to be here again this year and to see all of you. Grateful to the elders. Grateful for your prayers and your support of Memphis School of Preaching and our work there. And I wish I had time to talk about all the preachers I see in the audience tonight and the great inspirations they've been to me over my lifetime of preaching. You fellows may not realize it, but you inspire the rest of us. And when we read after you or hear you preach, it just makes it that much easier for us to continue, to keep on going on for the Lord. I've never been so frightened, though, as I was as he started to speak about Brother Whitten and gave his birth date. And I thought he was introducing you, and then I said, he's going to introduce me. I'm old, but I don't want folks to know how old. Were they ashamed when they committed abomination? Nay, they were not at all ashamed, neither could they blush. I'm going to put this thing down here, I guess. Therefore they shall fall among them that fall. At the time of their visitation, Jeremiah 8:12, at the time that I visit them, Jeremiah 6:15, they shall be cast down, saith the Lord. And in that verse he uses the term Jehovah to indicate that he was gracious, but they are no longer listening. Discerning students of the Old Testament will note that the two verses from Jeremiah are nearly equal in their statements. That's an Old Testament practice. That's a Jewish practice of repeating for emphasis. Folks who read the Old Testament need to understand that. For instance, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Those aren't two different statements. That's the same statement repeated in Psalm 19:1 twice for emphasis. Isaiah was told, cry aloud, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, Isaiah 58:1. Well, that's a repetition for emphasis. And so this is what Jeremiah has in mind for the people to whom he's preaching. He was speaking to the southern kingdom of Israel in particular, and she had become a dry vine. She had become a barren fig tree, Jeremiah 8:13. And so he is emphatically stating to her that there is something very wrong with you, because when you commit sin, you don't feel it. It doesn't come to your face. You can't blush. What is wrong with this nation? Let's look at the background of the statement for a moment to find out why in the world they weren't ashamed at all of the iniquity they were committing. They couldn't find anybody in the kingdom that blushed. I'll say to you tonight, it's hard to find folks in America that blush. I want to read you some statistics in just a moment. But during the 13th year of Josiah's reign, about 629 BC, God called Jeremiah to his task, Jeremiah 1, 2, and 3. His work continued even after the destruction of Jerusalem, when he escaped to Egypt, contrary to the Lord's will, incidentally, and he continued to preach to those folks down there in Egyptian exile. In fact, the last sermon I heard Bill Klein preach was from the book of Jeremiah as he preached to those exiles down there in Egypt who had been worshiping the Queen of Heaven. And they gave a number of reasons why they did that, and Brother Klein made a great and wonderful sermon out of that. Jeremiah was told by God that the destruction of the southern kingdom would come from the north. Well, Babylon had to travel up around those great rivers and down through the Fertile Crescent into Palestine, so the destruction came from the north as the southern kingdom was attacked. And Jeremiah had a tough task because he had to tell his own people, you're going to be destroyed, and you're going to go into captivity for 70 years. I don't know any preacher that would enjoy having to walk into a congregation someday and say, God's going to destroy this congregation. You folks are going to be taken out of the way for 70 years. You're so wicked, God can't stand you anymore. Now, how would you like to have to preach that Sunday morning? I know a couple of congregations. I won't get into that. In 2 Kings 22 and 23, we're told that a copy of the Torah was found in the temple, and Josiah tried to make some reformations in the kingdom. He was not successful. Here was a kingdom that had been spared from Assyrian captivity, and yet she didn't learn any lessons. She was still the same way as her older sister had been, and now she was facing destruction. And you remember that Nebuchadnezzar came and got her in 606 BC, in 597 BC, and 586 BC, and then destroyed the temple itself. And at that time in his life, Nebuchadnezzar was king of the world. And Jeremiah had told them, 70 years. But their preachers said, the ones they wanted to hear, no, 2 years. They cried, peace, peace. Well, there is no peace. I want to drive a peg down to Jeremiah 7 if you want to run over there with your fingers for a moment. And listen to something Jeremiah said to those folks. And brothers and sisters, get a hold of this. This may be the most important point of the whole night here. He told those people, don't say the temple of the Lord are these. God doesn't live in that temple. Just because the temple is in Jerusalem doesn't mean that God is on your side. I am here to tell you tonight that God doesn't live in Florida. Or Tennessee either. Or Alabama. And I kind of shudder when I hear Christians say, well, this is God's country. No. God doesn't live in temples made with hands. But when you start focusing on that's where God is, you know what happens to you spiritually? You become ritualistic. I'll go down to the temple, I'll meet God this Sabbath day, and I'll give him what he wants, and then I'll go about my business. And when you start thinking like that, your whole religion becomes external. And when your whole religion becomes external, how can you expect people to be blushing, to be ashamed when they commit sin? They can't possibly do so. They have no frame of reference to blush. And so it is that we have a reason now that these people couldn't blush. They were like those folks who go to services on Sunday morning just to make sure everybody sees them and they're in attendance. They get their ticket punched and you don't see them the rest of the week. And they never work for the Lord, they never do anything for the Lord, but they've got an outside faith. Sometime when you have a chance, preachers, take chapter 58 of Isaiah and take a look at those folks in that chapter. They were as external as you get in their religion. I went through the motions. You know what we could do? We could show some folks what that's like. If we went down, hell, let's go down to the store and get us a mannequin. You know what is a mannequin? And let's put a good-looking suit on him. White shirt and tie. Let's set him in the front pew here. When the Lord's Supper goes by, we'll tilt his head back, pour it in. Okay? And we'll put a songbook in his hand. And we'll have a couple of dollars in his... Well, we might have gone too far with these external folks. Let's just put $1 there. We'll put $1 in his pocket when the plate goes by. Wouldn't he be like... He'd be just as good as some folks are in their religion. That's the way those Jews were back. In fact, that fellow would be better off than some of my brethren. He wouldn't criticize me. See, when it's external, that's the problem. Well... Jeremiah kept saying, sword, famine, pestilence, 70 years. They got tired of it. And when you have an external religion, you don't want to hear the preacher. You just like him to shut up, leave you alone. That's what they told Jeremiah. If you'll read Jeremiah 27 through 13, I think I'll just let you read that. It's in the book. You'll find out how Jeremiah felt about all that. He wanted to quit preaching. And I train a lot of preachers, and I have a lot of phone calls. Brother Mosher, I'm thinking about quitting preaching. Why? When it all boils down to is, nobody appreciates what I'm doing. Jeremiah felt like that, but he finally figured it out that that word was like a fire in his bones, and he couldn't forbear, he had to preach it. And so he kept on preaching to a people who couldn't even blush. And so the question, were they ashamed when they committed abomination, came early in his work. And what he found out is they never were ashamed. They never could blush. If you look at Jeremiah 8:5, you'll find out that to preach to people who are obstinate in their wickedness and in their sin is to preach to a people who hold fast by deceit, who refuse to return. They are backsliding individuals. They are covetous liars, Jeremiah 6:13. They cannot speak aright. They turn to evil as a horse rushing into battle, Jeremiah 8:6. They don't know anything about God's justice, Jeremiah 8:7. And they claim that God's word was theirs, and then spurned its precepts. Visited a lady one time. She had one of those family Bibles on her coffee table. It was in a prominent place. When the sun came through the window, it just sort of shined on that Bible. I kind of opened it up, and there were some roses pressed in there. And here were some cards she'd stuck in there. So I asked the obvious question. I said, is this God's book? She said, yes. I said, well, you better get it back to him because you're not using it. You know what I'd like to be able to say on the judgment day? And now I'm making myself cry. I'd like to be able to say, Lord, I convinced every member of the Church of Christ to start studying his Bible finally, before I died. We used to give a test for incoming students, a 100-question Bible test. If they didn't pass it, they weren't allowed to come to school. We don't give it anymore. Because even preacher students, incoming preacher students, couldn't pass that test. Had pretty tough questions on it, like who was the first man. Look at Jeremiah 8:8. How do you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us? Lo, certainly in vain made he it, the pen of the scribes is in vain. Not only were they obstinate and external, but they were unable to blush because those who should have taught them the Word of God were perverting it. And so here you have the two reasons for the question. Were they ashamed when they committed abomination? No, because their religion was external and the people who were teaching them misapplied the Word and perverted it and twisted it. Legion are those people who say, well, my preacher preaches the Bible, when in reality he misuses the Bible and does not preach it at all. Well, that's the background then to the question. You have an external religion and perverted preachers, and they can't blush. And that word blush needs some study. Let's do that for just a moment. The question in the King James Version, as the title of this manuscript indicates, is equivalent to the meaning of the sentence. However, in Jeremiah 8:12, it's in the Niphal form, which means that it's in the prophetic absolute. And so the sense there is this: they are brought to shame. In Jeremiah 6:15, were they ashamed? It's in a different form. And the word there is interesting. The word ashamed is the combination of the word vosh and kalam. And when you put vosh together with kalam, it becomes an interesting study. The other word, blush, is kalam. But when you put vosh with it, with kalam, it denotes that a person who gets pale when he's fearful. Ever been so afraid that you got white as a sheet? All right, here's a person who, when he does something that's wrong, is frightened about it. It scares him a little bit to sin. But these people couldn't get that feeling. If you look at Proverbs 10 verse 5, you'll find out that a son can do this to his mother, cause her to be ashamed. A national son can do that to God, Isaiah 29:22. When you use this term with the little word of, it means that the person who's doing this sin exceeds the bounds of modesty and reason. 2 Kings 2:17, for instance. In Gesenia's study of this word vote, she says it should be the meaning should be sought in terms of terror. We have to be afraid when we commit sin. It ought to make our faces red. We ought to be ashamed. And when you read in your Old Testament that the enemies of God were ashamed, just translate that, put to flight by terror. And it is the case, brothers and sisters, that sin ought to put us to flight. Ought to run away from it. Ought to be afraid of it. It will wound us, disgrace us. And we ought to be red in the face. I have an article here from Insight Magazine, February 15, 1999. The article is entitled, "Go West, Ye Unchurched." It gives the percentages of those who go to church, some church, whatever it is, in America. In the state of Florida, 35% of your people go to church. The state that has the worst attendance in all of the United States is the state of Washington, 29%. In the Bible Belt, where I live, in Tennessee, what would you think? How many go to church? 39%. Tennessee. Texas, you're doing all right, 47%. The largest number in all of the United States that actually go to church is down here in Louisiana, 56%. That's the highest number of those who actually go to church. Brother Bradley tells me that down here on the beach there'll be 65,000 folks down there cavorting around. They all ought to be embarrassed in the dress they're wearing, but they're not. They're not ashamed. There's not a red face down there unless it's caused by the sun. Let me take a few minutes to make some application here. Brother, could I start now my time? I put, I think, 8 or 10 abominations in the manuscript. I thought of almost 100. Let me think about a few with you just a moment, because we have so much going on in our world. I have an illustration in there that actually happened to me when I was with W.B. West Jr. one day, and we went to lunch together and entered a cafeteria, and a young lady was coming out with a male, and another lady came into the foyer there, and they knew each other, and she tried to introduce this male to her friend, and she said, "This is my live-in boyfriend." They were all laughing as they went out of the restaurant. And I looked at Brother West, and his face was as red as a beet. And I was too. But you see, brothers and sisters, when you bring that stuff in the box that has the knobs on it, you don't get ashamed anymore when you see it. You become inured to it, seared with a hot iron. There's no shame. In 1948, I saw my first television set. It was about that big around, the screen. And they had a professional wrestling match on this thing. Oh, you're laughing, but it was actually wrestling then. Or as they call it down south, wrestling. They don't know how to pronounce anything down where I live. It was actually real. But what has that thing become now? I want you to walk with me to the woman at the well, and I want you to listen to the Lord tell her if she keeps coming back to that well, she's going to keep on getting thirsty. But if she'll drink at his well, she won't get thirsty anymore. And brothers and sisters, if we keep drinking at the world's well, we're going to want more and more and more and more of it. A Christian has to guard himself against all of that stuff, because if he can't blush, if he can't be ashamed when he sees sin, something will wrong with his heart. Fornication. The sin involved in that illustration with Brother West that I was telling you about, that lady, is epidemic in America. And I do mean I should have used the word pandemic. It's everywhere in every home. There are 11.9 million single parents in America. 9.8 million of them are women who have never been married. 56% of American homes only have one adult in them. 35% of all children born in the United States are illegitimate. In 1970, 21.4 million unmarried people in the United States. Now there are 50 million, and the rate is increasing, who are parents. 2.5 million divorces every year. In 1970, there were 70, that's just what, 33 years ago. There were 523,000 unmarried couples living together without benefit of marriage. Now it's risen to 4 million who cohabitate without, and that's the ones they've counted. They admitted it on the census. 39% of all children live with divorced parents. 35% live with a parent who never married. Listen, if you're in one of these situations, I'm not standing up here blaming you for this. I'm just reading the statistics. And what we've got to do is to get back to being ashamed of when we do these things and stop it. 60% of all children of single parents live in cities. The average male in America divorces for the second time at age 42, the average female at 39. And who blushes about all this illegitimacy and fornication? They're writing books now making these folks heroes. The single parent is a hero now. I've seen at least 7 books where they're talked about as heroines. And they fornicated and had the child, and the state has to pay for it. Who's blushing? In the book I read, fornication is still a sin. Galatians 5, 19 through 21. What about abortion? Who's blushing about that anymore? There's a big fight going on. I hope you've written your congressman. They're trying to stop this partial birth abortion. It's up for vote again. Let's get it stopped. That's one step in the right direction. But it's so bad in America now that parents are faced with deciding whether or not they want the child. And the doctor will ask you. Before my first grandson was born, the doctor said, this boy is going to have beta streptococcus pneumonia. If he lives, he won't be right. There are many options, the doctor said. And the mother of the little boy said there are no options. Because the mother of that little boy was a Christian lady. There weren't any options. He did die. He died at the age of 5 months. But I know where he is. And we didn't kill him either. You know, if that thing's not alive in the womb, why do they have to kill it? From 1970 to 1980, the number of abortions in the United States increased. From 1981 to 82, for some reason, the growth rate stabilized. But starting in 1982, it started to increase again at 5% a year. In 1995 and to now, there are 311 abortions in the United States now for every 1,000 live births. There were fewer than 1 death due to complications per 100,000 legal abortions. They do better killing those children than they do keeping alive the ones who are born. The highest number of abortions every year is in California. 39 of every 1,000 births are terminated. Wyoming has the lowest rate, 2 per 1,000. Worldwide, every year, there are 46 million abortions. Were they ashamed when they committed murder? Some religious leaders have even encouraged this practice as a woman's right to choose. That's not her body. That's the baby's body, and I wish I had time to go into the medical part of that. Need to get my son down here, my medical doctor son, let him talk to you about whose body that is. What about homosexuality? Is there a television program now in prime time without that thing on it? I don't know, I don't watch television in prime time anymore. One fellow wrote in our society that viewing gay and lesbian persons as different types of people born to be homosexual with no other options open to them, and viewing the gay or the lesbian person in the context of the radical sexual revolution of the past 30 years, modern Western culture is now taking a view of homosexuality that is unique in the history of man. We're the first nation in the world ever to view this heinous sin this way. There are no myths about homosexuality in the Bible. It's condemned as sin. Romans 1, 26 and 27. And the strange thing about all of this is psychologists are now meeting themselves coming back. The homosexual is claiming he was born this way, but if you'll read the book, I have a statement there from the American Psychiatric Association, where their report was that many professional therapists continue to treat homosexually oriented people who want to change and find excellent results. You know, even if you were born that way, God said don't practice it. Glenn Hitchcock has the ability to have 45 wives. How many is he going to have? One. Doesn't matter about your ability, it matters about what God said to do with it. So even if I were born that way, if I wanted to go to heaven, I wouldn't practice it. What about the way folks talk today? The Lord's name has become an interjection in our society. My is said over and over again by, I don't know, so many folks, I don't even want to go into it. And I heard a Christian lady say the other day, oh golly gee whiz, excuse my French, she said. And excuse mine there, because all three of those were curse words. Golly is another way of saying God, folks. Look it up in the dictionary. Geez is another way of saying Jesus. Those are simply euphemisms, but when we use the euphemism, what are we doing? Trying to avoid saying the word? The great Baptist preacher Spurgeon one time, in 1898, got up in front of a crowd on an August day, hot day. 10,000 people had come to hear this man speak, Charles Spurgeon. That old man was in his 80s at this time, and he got up there and he wiped his head with his handkerchief and he said, it's hot as blank today, and he said the word. And that audience went crazy. This man of God just cursed? And he put his handkerchief back in his pocket and he said, you know, I heard a Christian say that the other day. Brother, you ought to read that sermon. He preached on profanity. When he got done, I think those folks went away not using it anymore. I got so many of these, do I need to quit? Can read the book, I guess. Let me skip a couple. Besides the overt sins of murder and lying and all of the other things, you know, I live in the murder capital of the United States, Memphis, Tennessee. Per capita, we have more murders there than any other place in the United States. Even Detroit. We out-murder Detroit. And nobody's embarrassed. Just tax us some more, make us pay for it. But what about drunkenness in our society? The drunk in our society is thought of as funny. He was made a picture like that on the Andy Griffith show that my brother loved to use on Wednesday nights. Well, Otis Campbell would come in there as a comic. There's nothing funny about a drunk. I grew up under one. I'll tell you right now, there's nothing funny about them at all. They kill more people on the highways. They are costing industry $500 billion a year. 47% of all job injuries are related to alcohol or drug abuse. 13 million known alcoholics in our country, and another 12.5 million counted as heavy drinkers, whatever that means. Fellow said he was just a social drinker. I said, do you commit social adultery? Drug addiction in our country has a price tag every year now of $276 billion. You folks want to know why your medical bills, your medical insurance is so high? I'm talking about it right now. You ought to look at Proverbs 20 verse 1 and also Proverbs 23. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babblings? I love this one. Who hath wounds without cause? A drunk will wake up in the morning, he doesn't know where those black and blue parts came from. Families are destroyed. Myriads of children who are reared around alcoholics have to go through therapy themselves because children reared in a drug atmosphere, children reared in an alcoholic atmosphere, go up psychologically damaged. From the time I was about 18 until I was 30, I had to go through a lot of therapy. Because you grow up with all kinds of anger and disappointment and disgust. You feel as if your childhood has been taken away from you. And who would blushes? We don't blush, we build Noah's taverns. We're as bad as Corinth, I think. When they dug up Corinth, they found 50 taverns in a 100-yard stretch in the old city. What about pornography? Do you know what it's going to cost you to keep pornography off your computer this year? $700 billion. Web intrusion protection, $700 billion. It was only $65 million in 2001. It's going up. Multitudes are addicted to it, but it's causing some problems for us. There were 260,300 reported cases of rape of children under 12 in 1995. I don't know what it was this year. The Hugh Hefners and Larry Flints of our world are having a field day with our children. I can't drive on a highway anymore and I'll see an adult store. Now why do they call it adult? What's adult about that? They ought to call it perverted children's store. Anybody that would buy that stuff's got to be perverted somehow, or something's wrong with them in some situation. I have here one other thing I wanted to read to you, if I can find it. I've got to quit, right? I knew he was coming up here. This is about a former president. The question was, if I could find here it is. Please tell me whether the following statement applies to that president or not. He has the highest personal, moral, and ethical standards. Yes, 24%. No, 76%. I may not be invited back after this one. But I found out that some of my brothers and sisters voted for him. I don't care which party you vote for. Try to find a moral one. Were they ashamed when they committed abomination? Rudyard Kipling wrote a long time ago about a teenage girl who said, I cannot check my girlish flush. My color comes and goes. I redden to my fingertips and sometimes to my nose. Would that we could find some boys and girls like that again, who can blush when they see sin and hear about it or even practice it. Thank you.